Commander Lysa Valdris pressed her face against the cold metal window of the observation deck. Below her, the planet Ethos was dying. The once blue and green world now glowed with angry red light. Cracks ran across the surface like broken glass, and orange fire shot up from deep holes in the ground. Her home was ending, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The star that had warmed Ethos for millions of years was getting ready to die. The scientists said it would happen soon, maybe in days, maybe in weeks. When it did, the explosion would destroy everything in the system, every tree, every building, every memory of the Zephyrian people would be gone. Lysa walked through the long halls of the last evacuation ship. Her people moved quietly around her, their gray skin looking pale and tired. The Zephyrians were tall and thin with large, dark eyes that showed every emotion. Right now, those eyes showed only sadness and fear. Children stayed close to their parents. Old people sat in corners staring at nothing. Everyone knew this might be their last day as a free people. The ship was crowded and dirty. Too many people lived in spaces meant for half as many. The air recyclers worked too hard and made strange noises. Food was running low. Water had to be shared carefully. These were not the proud ships that had once explored distant stars. These were the last broken pieces of a great civilization. Only 12,000 Zapians were still alive. Once their race had numbered in the billions. They had built beautiful cities that grew like living things. Their technology could heal any wound and make planets bloom with life. They had traveled to distant worlds and made friends with many alien races. Everyone in the galaxy respected the peaceful Zephyrians, but that was before their sun started to die. 3 years ago, the first warnings came from the science stations. The star was running out of fuel. Soon it would collapse and explode in a blast that would destroy everything nearby. The Zephyrian leaders sent messages to every government in the galaxy, begging for help. At first the answers were hopeful. The Voran Empire with its powerful war fleets promised to send ships to help move the Zephyrian people. The Nexus Collective, which controlled most of the galaxy's trade, offered to find new worlds where the refugees could live. The Galactic Confederation itself voted to provide aid to the dying race. Lysa remembered watching those votes on the news broadcasts. She had felt such hope. Her people would be saved. The great powers of the galaxy would not let an entire civilization die. But then the survey teams arrived. They studied Ethos. With their machines and computers, they tested the soil and the rocks in the water. They looked for valuable metals and rare elements. They searched for anything that might make it worth the cost of helping. They found nothing. Ethos was a world of living beauty, but it held no treasures that the galaxy wanted. There were no rare metals to mine, no powerful energy sources to harvest, no strategic location that would help in wars. The planet was worthless to everyone except the people who called it home. One by one, the promises were broken. The Voran Empire said their ships were needed for more important missions. They could not spare resources for a people who offered nothing in return. The Nexus Collective found cheaper ways to spend their money. Helping refugees would not increase their profits. The smaller governments followed the lead of the major powers. If the Vorthans and the Nexus did not care, why should they? Even the Galactic Confederation changed its mind. They said the Zaporans could apply for refugee status and wait in camps on dead worlds at the edge of galaxy. There they might eventually be given small pieces of worthless land where they could try to rebuild their lives. The camps had no technology, no resources, and no hope. They were places where unwanted people were sent to be forgotten. Lisa had been a young officer then, serving on border patrol ships. She watched as her people's hopes slowly died. The proud Zathurian fleet was reduced to a handful of old ships. The great cities of Ethos emptied as people fled to the evacuation centers. The biotechnology that had made their civilization great was left behind because the ships had no room for anything except people. Now, as she stood on the observation deck, Lisa was no longer young. 3 years of watching her people suffer had aged her beyond her years. She was now the highest-ranking officer in what remained of the Zahirian Defense Corps. The responsibility for 12,000 lives rested on her shoulders. The communication system made a soft sound. A message was coming in from the Planetary Evacuation Center. Lisa pressed the button to receive it. Commander Valdris, this is the final group, said the voice of Captain Kesh. Morven, we have 300 people ready for pick up. After this, Ethos will be empty. Lisa closed her eyes. 300 people, the last Zahirians who would ever see their home world alive. Understood, Captain. Bring them up. She walked to the command center of the ship. It was smaller than a human closet, but it held all the controls needed to fly the vessel. Most of the crew were not trained officers. They were teachers and doctors and artists who had learned to operate the ship because there was no one else left to do it. Lieutenant Yara Thesson looked up from her station. She was young, barely an adult, but she had learned to pilot a starship because the real pilots were all dead or missing. Commander, we are receiving the last transport now, she reported. All refugee ships report they are ready to leave orbit. Lisa nodded. 12 ships, 12,000 people. That was all that remained of the mighty Zahirian civilization. Where do we go now, Commander? Asked Yara, the question everyone had been afraid to ask. Lisa stared at the dying planet below. They had nowhere to go. No world would take them. No government would help them. They had enough fuel to reach maybe 2 or 3 nearby systems. But all of those worlds belonged to races that had already rejected them. Then she remembered something. A few months ago, the long-range sensors had picked up strange signals from an unexplored region of space. Communications were primitive and simple, nothing like the advanced technology of the major galactic powers. They came from a young species that had only recently learned to travel between stars. The signals came from a system called Sol, from the 3rd planet of a yellow star. The species called themselves humans. According to the old survey records, they were a very young race. They had only developed faster than light travel in the last 50 years. Their technology was crude and their ships were slow. They had no powerful weapons and no vast fleets. They were exactly the kind of primitive people that the great powers of the galaxy ignored, but they were also the only people in this part of space that the Zafarans had not yet asked for help. It was a desperate idea. The humans were too young and too weak to provide real assistance. Approaching them would break every law about contact with primitive species, the Galactic Confederation, would be angry if they found out, but the Confederation had already abandoned the Zapirians, so their anger no longer mattered. Lisa made her decision, set course for the Sol system, she ordered. Yara looked surprised. Commander, that system is restricted. The species there has not been cleared for contact. The species there is our only hope, Lisa replied. Send the course to all ships. We leave orbit in 1 hour. She took one last look at Ethos. The planet was shaking now as the stars. Gravity pulled at its core. Soon, very soon, it would all be over, but maybe, just maybe, these humans would be different. Maybe they would care about helping others even when there was no profit in it. Maybe they would prove that there was still kindness left in the galaxy. The Zephyrian fleet turned away from their dying world and jumped to hyperspace, carrying the last hope of an entire civilization toward an unknown destiny. Among the stars, Captain Jake Morrison was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm started screaming. He nearly dropped his cup as red lights flashed all around the bridge of the Earth defense ship Ranger. His crew rushed to their stations, fingers flying over control panels as they tried to figure out what was happening. Sir, we have multiple contacts appearing at the edge of the solar system, reported Lieutenant Ben Carter, his voice tight with worry. 12 large vessels, design unknown. They just appeared out of nowhere. Jake sat down his coffee and moved to the main screen. What he saw made his breath catch in his throat. Ships were huge, easily 10 times larger than anything Earth had ever built. They looked organic, like they had grown. Instead of being built, their hulls curved and flowed like living creatures, and they glowed with soft blue light. Are they hostile? Jake asked. No. Weapons detected, sir, said Carter. They're moving slowly, almost drifting. And sir, they're sending a signal on multiple frequencies. Jake felt his heart pounding. This was it. First contact with an alien race. Every human had wondered when this day would come, but nobody had expected it to happen like this. Put me through to Earth. Command, Jake ordered. Priority Alpha. Tell them we have visitors. Within minutes, Jake's screen filled with the face of Admiral Connor Blake, the head of Earth's Defense Forces. Behind him, Jake could see other officials rushing around, all talking at once. Morrison. What's your status? Blake asked. 12 alien vessels, sir. Large but not aggressive. They're trying to communicate with us. Admiral Blake nodded. We're sending Dr. Helen Carter up to you immediately. She's our best expert on alien languages. Until she arrives, do not make any moves that could be seen as threatening. We don't want to start a war with our first alien visitors. Dr. Carter arrived on the Ranger 3 hours later. She was a small woman with gray hair and bright eyes that missed nothing. She had spent her whole career studying the possibility of alien contact, and now her moment had come. What do we know about their signals? She asked as soon as she stepped onto the bridge. They're broadcasting on dozens of frequencies, reported Lieutenant Sarah Wells, the communications officer. The patterns are complex, but they seem to be repeating the same basic message over and over. Dr. Carter sat down at the communication station and put on the headphones. For the next 2 hours, she listened to the alien signals, making notes and running the sounds through computer programs. Finally, she looked up with excitement in her eyes. I think I can make contact, she said. Their language is incredibly advanced, but they're also broadcasting what looks like a translation program. They want to talk to us. Jake nodded. Do it, Dr. Carter. Adjusted the controls and began sending a response. The bridge fell silent as everyone waited for long minutes. Nothing happened. Then the alien signal changed, becoming more complex and detailed. They're responding, Dr. Carter said, her voice filled with wonder. The translation is working. I can understand some of their words now. For the next hour, Dr. Carter worked to establish better communication with the alien ships. Slowly, words began to make sense. The aliens called themselves Zaphirans. They came from a world called Ethos, and they were asking for help. Captain, Dr. Carter said suddenly, her face pale. You need to hear this. They're refugees. Their entire star system is dying, and they have nowhere else to go. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. How many of them are there? 12,000 people on those 12 ships. That's all that's left of their entire race. The bridge fell silent. 12,000 people. An entire civilization reduced to a handful of ships drifting at the edge of human space with nowhere to go. Sir, said Lieutenant Wells quietly, they're asking permission to approach Earth. Jake looked around at his crew. He saw the same mix of fear and wonder on their faces that he felt in his own heart. These were the most advanced aliens humanity had ever encountered, but they were also desperate refugees fleeing from a dying world. Dr. Carter, Jake said, can you ask them why they came here out of all the worlds in the galaxy? Why did they choose Earth? Dr. Carter spoke into her microphone in the alien language she was quickly learning. The response came back immediately. They say every other world in the galaxy has turned them away. She translated. The major galactic powers won't help them because their home world has no valuable resources. Earth is the only place they haven't tried. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. What kind of civilization would abandon an entire race just because helping them wasn't profitable? Get me Admiral Blake, he ordered. The Admiral's face appeared on screen a few minutes later. Behind him, Jake could see that the command center was now full of people. Scientists, military officers, and government officials all crowded around monitors and communication equipment. Adam, we've established contact, Jake reported. They call themselves Zahirians, and they're refugees from a dying star system. 12,000 survivors looking for a place to live. Admiral Blake's expression grew serious. What do they want from us? Just somewhere to go. Sir, the rest of the galaxy has abandoned them. Blake was quiet for a moment. Morrison patched their communication through to Earth. The President needs to hear this directly. Within an hour, President Maria Santos was talking directly to the Zaphirian leader, a military commander named Lisa Valdris. The conversation was broadcast live to every nation on Earth, and the whole world listened as Commander Valdris told her story. She spoke of the great Zaphirian civilization with its beautiful cities and advanced technology. She described how their star had begun to die and how they had begged every major power in the galaxy for help. She told of promises made and broken, of survey teams that found their world worthless, and of refugee camps on dead worlds where unwanted people were sent to be forgotten. We ask nothing from you except a chance to live, Commander Valdris said through Dr. Carter's translation. We have technology that might be useful to your people, and We are willing to work hard to earn our place. We only want to survive. President Santos listened to the whole story without speaking. When it was over, she was quiet for a long moment. Commander Valdres, she finally said, I need to discuss this with the leaders of our world. Can you wait for our answer? We have waited 3 years for someone to help us, came the reply. We can wait a little longer. The next 12 hours were the busiest human history. Every government on Earth held emergency meetings. The United Nations called a special session. Scientists studied what little they knew about saffron technology. Military leaders worried about the security implications of allowing advanced aliens to settle on Earth. But something else was happening too. Regular people all over the world were watching the news and seeing the faces of the Zaphirian refugees on their screens. They saw parents holding children, elderly people who looked tired and scared, young adults who had lost everything they had ever known. Phone calls poured into government offices, emails flooded official websites. The message was the same everywhere: help them. Farmers in Iowa offered to share their land. Cities in Europe voted to open their doors to alien refugees. Families everywhere said they would take Zaphirians into their homes. The response was so overwhelming that government computers crashed from all the messages. Jake watched it all from the bridge of the Ranger, where the alien ships waited patiently for an answer. He had never been more proud to be human. Finally, President Santos called a press conference that was watched by every person on Earth and every Zaphirian in the refugee fleet. Throughout human history, she said, we have been at our best when we have helped others in need. Today we have the chance to help an entire civilization survive. The United States of America votes to welcome the Zaphirian people to Earth. One by one, every nation on the planet gave the same answer: yes. Welcome, come home. Dr. Carter translated the decision to Commander Valdres. The response came back immediately, but it wasn't words. It was something that needed no translation at all. It was the sound of 12,000 people crying with relief and joy. The Zaphirian ships began moving toward Earth, carrying the last survivors of a great civilization toward a new home among the stars. The first Zaphirian ship landed in a field outside Denver, Colorado on a warm Tuesday morning. Lisa Rodriguez stood at the edge of the landing zone with hundreds of other volunteers watching as the organic-looking vessel settled gently onto the grass. The ship's hull glowed with soft blue light, and strain symbols pulsed along its sides like a heartbeat. Lisa was a construction engineer, and she had volunteered to help build homes for the alien refugees. She had expected to work with metal and concrete, the same materials she used every day. She had not expected, though, Zaphirians to step off their ship carrying what looked like glowing seeds. Commander Lisa Valdres was the first to emerge from the ship. She was taller than most humans, with gray skin and large dark eyes that seemed to see everything at once. Behind her came other Zaphirians, families carrying small children, elderly people leaning on walking sticks, young adults looking around with wonder at their new world. Lisa watched as a Zaphirian child, no bigger than a human 6-year-old, ran to his mother and pointed at the blue sky above them. The mother smiled, and Lisa realized it was the first time she had seen a Zaphirian smile. It was a beautiful thing. Dr. Helen Carter stepped forward to greet Commander Valdris. Over the past week she had become Earth's expert on the Zephyrian language, and she could now speak it almost fluently. "Welcome to Earth, Doctor," Carter said in Zephyrian. "Thank you," Commander Valdris replied in careful English. "Your people have given us a great gift. We will not forget it." President Santos had assigned teams to help with every aspect of Zephyrian settlement. There were doctors to study their medical needs, teachers to help their children learn human languages, and engineers like Lisa to build places where they could live. But it quickly became clear that the Zephyrians had their own ideas about construction. Lisa watched in amazement as Keith Morvan, a Zephyrian biotechnology specialist, planted one of the glowing seeds in the ground. Within hours it had grown into a small building. The walls were alive, breathing and changing color with the temperature. The structure cleaned its own air and provided its own light. It was the most advanced building Lisa had ever seen, grown from a single seed in less than a day. "How is this possible?" Lisa asked. Through Dr. Carter's translation. Keth smiled, the same beautiful expression Lisa had seen on the child's mother. "We have worked with living systems for thousands of years," he explained. "Our buildings grow like plants, but they are designed to meet our needs. They regulate temperature, clean water, and even provide food if needed." Lisa realized that everything she knew about construction was about to change. The Zephyrians didn't build with dead materials like steel and concrete. They grew their homes and cities like gardens. "Can you teach us how to do this?" Lisa asked. "We would be honored to share our knowledge," Keth replied. "Your people saved our lives. The least we can do is share what we know." Over the next few months, teams of humans and Zephyrians worked together all over the Earth. They built new communities that were unlike anything that had ever existed. The Zephyrian biotechnology could create buildings that needed no power from outside sources and produce no waste. Combined with human manufacturing techniques, they could build these structures quickly and cheaply. The partnership was working better than anyone had hoped. The Zephyrians were grateful and eager to help. They shared their advanced medical knowledge, helping human doctors cure diseases that had puzzled them for generations. Their environmental technology made it possible to clean polluted rivers and replant dead forests in weeks instead of decades. But not everyone in the galaxy was happy about what was happening on Earth. The news of humanity's alliance with the Zephyrian spread quickly through the galactic communication networks. On the Vorthon home world, War Marshal Thuven Cross read the reports with growing anger. Vorthons were a warrior race that controlled much of the galaxy through force and fear. They did not like it when primitive species acted without permission. These humans dare to shelter refugees without consulting the Confederation. Cross growled to his advisors. They have no right to interfere in galactic affairs. On the trade world of Nexus Prime, trade Director Quinn Nexer was equally unhappy. The Nexus Collective controlled most of the galaxy's economy, and they made their profits by keeping advanced technology away from younger species. If the humans gained access to Zephyrian biotechnology, it could disrupt the carefully controlled galactic trade system. Send word to the Confederation Council, Nexer ordered. This situation must be corrected before it gets out of hand. Back on Earth, Lisa was working with Keth to design a new type of space station when the long-range sensors detected approaching ships. Admiral Blake called an emergency meeting at Earth Defense Headquarters. "We have a problem," Blake announced to the assembled human and Zapirian leaders. "A galactic Confederation fleet is approaching our system, 50 ships, including Voran battle cruisers and Nexus enforcement vessels." Commander Valdris looked worried. "They have come for us," she said quietly. "The Confederation does not like it when their decisions are questioned." "What do they want?" President Santos asked. "They will demand that you turn us over to them," Valdris explained. "They will say we need to be relocated to proper refugee facilities for our own safety. But we know what those facilities are. Really, like they are prisons where unwanted people are left to die." Admiral Blake stood up. "That's not going to happen. These people are under Earth's protection now." The Confederation fleet arrived 3 days later. Their ships were massive and threatening, bristling with weapons and painted in the dark colors of military authority. The lead ship sent a message demanding to speak with Earth's leaders. Immediately, the meeting took place aboard the Confederation flagship. Admiral Blake went personally, accompanied by Commander Valdris and Dr. Carter as translator. They were met by War Marshal Cross, a huge alien with scarred gray skin and cold yellow eyes. "You have interfered in matters beyond your understanding," Cross said without any greeting. "The Zephyrian refugees are the responsibility of the Galactic Confederation. You will surrender them immediately. The Zephyrians are free people who came to us asking for help." Admiral Blake replied calmly. "We gave them sanctuary, and they are welcome to stay as long as they wish." Cross's eye narrowed. "You are a primitive species with no rights in galactic law. You will obey Confederation authority or face the consequences." "And what consequences would those be?" Blake asked. "Your planet will be placed under Confederation oversight until you learn to follow proper procedures." Cross replied. "Your space travel privileges will be suspended. Your trade will be regulated. You will submit to our authority in all matters." Blake felt anger building inside him, but he kept his voice steady. "I think you misunderstand the situation. War Marshal, Earth is not a member of your Confederation. We don't recognize your authority over our world or our decisions." "Then you will learn to recognize it," Cross said. He turned to his officers, prepared to enforce Confederation law. The meeting ended badly. The Confederation fleet moved into attack position around Earth, while human and Zephyrian ships prepared to defend their new home. But something unexpected happened. As the two fleets faced each other in space, more ships began arriving in the Sol system, not Confederation reinforcements but vessels from dozens of different worlds, species that had been watching the situation with interest. The Altarians, who had been conquered by the Vorans 50 years earlier, sent 3 ships. Kepler colonists who had been forced to pay tribute to the Nexus Collective for generations arrived with a small but determined fleet. Even some Voran and Nexus citizens disgusted with their own governments came to stand with Earth. Captain Tors of the Earth Defense Cruiser Liberty found herself commanding a mixed fleet of human, Zahirian, and rebel ships. It was the strangest alliance in galactic history, united not by species or politics but by the simple idea that helping refugees was The right thing to do. War Marshal Cross realized that his easy victory had become something much more complicated. The primitive humans had somehow inspired half the galaxy to stand against Confederation authority. The first battle began when a Confederation patrol tried to capture a Zahirian research vessel. Captain Torres ordered the Liberty to intervene, and suddenly space was full of energy beams and missile trails. The galaxy was about to learn that humans and their allies were not as weak as they appeared. The battle lasted only 20 minutes, but it changed everything. Captain Torres watched from the bridge of the Liberty as Confederation ships retreated from Earth orbit. 3 of their vessels had been damaged, while the human Zirian Alliance had lost no ships at all. How is that possible? Asked Lieutenant Dan Miller, Torres' tactical officer. Their ships are supposed to be much more advanced than ours. Torres smiled as she looked at the readings on her screen. They are more advanced, but they're not used to fighting enemies who think differently than they do. Zafirian biotechnology can adapt in real time, and human tactics focus on doing the unexpected. Together we're something they've never faced before. The news of Earth's victory spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. On worlds throughout the Confederation, people gathered around communication screens to watch recordings of the battle. They saw small human ships working together with organic Zahirian vessels, using new tactics that the mighty Confederation fleet could not counter. But the news meant more than just military victory. For the first time in centuries, someone had stood up to the Confederation and one species that had been conquered, enslaved, or ignored for generations suddenly saw hope. On the desert world of Calari Prime, an old woman named Vest Thalin watched the battle recordings with tears in her eyes. The Kari had been slaves of the Nexus Collective for 200 years, forced to work in the mines that produced rare metals for galactic trade. Their children were taken away to work in factories on distant worlds. Their culture was slowly being destroyed. Did you see? Fess said to her grandson, who sat beside her in their tiny underground shelter. The humans fought for people they barely knew. They risked everything to protect refugees. Her grandson Jorik was only 16, but he had already spent 4 years working in the uranium mines. His hands were scarred from handling the dangerous materials, and his lungs were damaged from breathing toxic dust. The humans are far away, grandmother, Jorik said. Sadly, they cannot help us. Vest stood up slowly, her old joints aching from years of hard labor. Maybe they cannot come to us, she said, but we can go to them. If they can fight the Confederation and win, maybe they can teach us how to fight too. 3 days later, the first Kari resistance group attacked a Nexus mining facility. They used simple weapons and basic tactics, but they had something they had not possessed in generations: hope. The attack succeeded and word spread to other Calari communities. Within weeks, rebellion was spreading across dozens of worlds. The PN, who had been driven from their home world by Voran expansion, began organizing guerrilla forces. The Zenturi colonies, forced to pay crushing taxes to Confederation governors, started refusing to cooperate with government officials. None of these rebellions were large or powerful enough to seriously threaten the Confederation, but together they created something that had not existed in the galaxy for centuries. Widespread resistance to the established order. Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster was sitting in a planning meeting on Earth when Admiral Blake called her aside. "Foster, I have special assignment for you," Blake said quietly. "These rebellions across the galaxy are brave, but they're not going to succeed without help. I want you to put together a task force to provide covert support." Amy nodded. She had been hoping for exactly this kind of mission. "What kind of support, sir?" "Weapons, supplies, training, whatever they need. Use Zapperian stealth technology to get in and out without being detected. Show these people that they're not alone in this fight." Amy's task force consisted of 6 ships, half human and half Gerian. They used advanced biotechnology to disguise their vessels as common cargo ships or maintenance craft. Over the next 6 months they visited more than 30 worlds, delivering weapons to freedom fighters and teaching them how to use guerrilla tactics effectively. The work was dangerous. Confederation patrols were everywhere, and getting caught would mean imprisonment or death for the entire team. But Amy and her people had seen what the Confederation did to those who opposed them, and they knew the risks were worth taking. On Kari Prime they met with Jorik Thalin, who had become a leader in the resistance despite his young age. Amy watched as he organized attacks on mining facilities with tactical skill that impressed even her experienced soldiers. "How did you learn to do this?" Amy asked through a translator. Jorik smiled, and Amy was struck by how much older he looked than his 17 years. "We studied the recordings of your battle at Earth," he said. "We watched how you use small forces to defeat larger ones. We learned that courage and intelligence can overcome superior firepower." The Confederation was not blind to what was happening. War Marshal Cross called an emergency meeting of the Confederation Council and demanded immediate action. "These rebellions are being supported by the humans," he told the assembled representatives. "They are providing weapons and training to terrorist groups across our territory. This cannot be allowed to continue." Trade Director Quinn Nexer agreed. "Our mining operations have been disrupted on 17 worlds. Our trade revenues are down by 12%. The humans must be stopped before this infection spreads further." The Council voted to authorize a massive punitive expedition against Earth. 300 Confederation warships would be sent to crush the human rebellion once and for all. The fleet would be the largest military force ever assembled by the Yao Confederation. When Admiral Blake received intelligence about the approaching armada, he knew Earth was in serious trouble. Even with Zaffron technology and allied support, they could not hope to defeat such a massive force in open battle. "We need a different strategy," Blake told his senior staff. "We can't fight them ship to ship, but maybe we don't have to." Dr. Helen Carter had been working with Zapperian scientists to adapt their biotechnology for military use. "We've made a breakthrough," she announced at the emergency meeting. "We can create shield generators that protect entire planets, not just individual ships. Power requirements are enormous, but if we network all of Earth's power plants together, it might work." The next 3 months were a race against time. Human engineers worked alongside Zapperian biotechnicians to build the planetary shield system. Every power plant on Earth was connected to the network. solar collectors in space, fusion, reactors on the ground, even wind farms, and hydroelectric dams all fed energy into the massive defensive system. Meanwhile, Amy Foster's task force continued their covert operations. They knew the Confederation fleet was coming, and they worked harder than ever to arm and train resistance groups throughout the galaxy. If Earth fell, these rebels would be the only hope for freedom. The Confederation Armada arrived on a cold December morning. 300 warships surrounded Earth in perfect formation, their weapons trained on the blue and white planet below. War Marshal Cross sent a final ultimatum: surrender immediately or face total destruction. President Santos's response was broadcast across the galaxy: the people of Earth do not surrender to tyrants. The bombardment began immediately. Massive energy beams lanced down from the Confederation ships, striking Earth's atmosphere with enough force to destroy continents, but instead of burning through to the surface, they beams struck Dr. Carter's planetary shields and scattered harmlessly into space. Cross stared at his tactical displays in disbelief. His most powerful weapons were having no effect at all. Impossible, he muttered. No planetary shield can withstand this much firepower. But the shields held, and Earth remained safe. Behind its barrier of living energy, the Confederation fleet found itself trapped between an impregnable defense and an increasingly hostile galaxy. All around them, rebel ships were appearing as resistance groups throughout the Confederation territory launched coordinated attacks. For the first time in his military career, War Marshal Cross began to realize that he might lose this war. The Siege of Earth lasted for 8 months, but it was unlike any war the galaxy had ever seen. The Confederation fleet surrounded the planet, firing their most powerful weapons day and night, but Dr. Helen Carter's planetary shields held strong, protecting every person on the surface below. War Marshal Thuven Cross grew more frustrated with each passing week. His 300 warships should have been able to destroy any planet in the galaxy, but Earth remained untouched behind its barrier of living energy. Worse, his fleet was trapped. Every time his ships tried to leave Earth orbit, they were attacked by rebel forces from across the galaxy. The resistance movements that Lieutenant Colonel Amy Foster had helped to organize were now working together like never before. Kalari rebels attacked Confederation supply lines. Perrin Garriller struck at communication stations. Even some Vorthon and Nexus citizens had joined the fight against their own governments. On the bridge of his flagship, Cross stared at the tactical display that showed rebel attacks happening on dozens of worlds. Red warning lights flashed constantly as reports came in of damaged facilities, captured supply ships, and government officials fleeing their posts. Sir, said his tactical officer, we're receiving a message from the Kalari system. The rebels have taken control of the main mining facilities. They're demanding that all Kalari slaves be freed immediately. Cross slammed his fist on the console. Send reinforcements to restore order, sir. We don't have any reinforcements to send. Every available ship is needed here at Earth. That was the problem that Cross had never expected. By bringing so much of the Confederation military to attack Earth, he had left the rest of the galaxy undefended. The rebels were taking advantage of this weakness, and there was nothing he could do about it without abandoning his attack on the human world, on Earth. President Maria Santos watched the galactic situation from the emergency command center deep beneath the capital city. The planetary shields protected them from Confederation weapons, but she knew the real battle was being fought on distant worlds by people who had never met a human but had been inspired by humanity's example. "We're receiving reports from Amy Foster's team," announced General Patricia Hayes, who had been coordinating Earth support for the rebel movements. The uprising on Century 7 was successful. The Confederation governor has fled and the colonists have declared independence. Santos nodded. "How many worlds have broken free so far?" 43, Madame President, and the number is growing. Every day, Commander Lysa Valdris entered the command center carrying a data pad with the latest intelligence reports. In the months since arriving at Earth, she had become one of humanity's most trusted allies and advisors. "The Confederation Council is meeting. Emergency session," Valdris reported. "Our sources inside their government say they're discussing a negotiated settlement to end the war." Santos raised an eyebrow. "After 8 months of trying to destroy us, now they want to talk. They're losing control of their empire." Valdris explained. "The rebellions are spreading faster than they can contain them. Some of their member governments are starting to question whether the war was a good idea." The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Captain Ryan Clark commanded the defense station Guardian, which orbited Earth's moon. He had been monitoring Confederation communication since the siege began, and he noticed something interesting in the encrypted messages between enemy ships. "Admiral Blake, I'm picking up what sounds like dissent in the Confederation fleet," Clark reported during the daily briefing. "Some of their ship captains are questioning their orders. There's talk about whether they should be fighting this war at all." Blake leaned forward with interest. "Can you identify which ships?" "At least a dozen, sir, including some high-ranking officers. They seem particularly upset about the attacks on civilian targets in the rebel systems." Blake made a decision that would change the course of the war. Instead of treating all Confederation forces as enemies, he authorized secret communications with the officers who seemed to be having doubts about their mission. The first defection happened 3 days later. Captain Sevik Thane of the Vorin cruiser Destiny sent a coded message to Earth offering to switch sides. He was disgusted by his government's willingness to destroy entire worlds just to maintain power. "I became a soldier to protect people, not to murder civilians," Tyne explained during a secret meeting with Admiral Blake. "What my government is doing is wrong, and I cannot be part of it anymore." Within weeks, more Confederation officers began defecting. They brought their ships and crews with them, providing Earth with valuable intelligence about enemy plans and capabilities. Some were motivated by moral objections to the war, others by loyalty to friends and family members in the rebel systems. The most important defector was Lyron Voss, a high-ranking administrator in the Nexus Collective. She had access to classified information about the Confederation's economic problems, and what she revealed shocked everyone. "The war is bankrupting them," Voss explained to President Santos during a secure video conference. "Cost of maintaining such a large fleet, combined with the loss of revenue from Rebel Worlds is destroying their economy. Trade Director Nexer is facing pressure from Nexus shareholders to end the conflict. Santos saw an opportunity. What would it take to convince them to negotiate? Show them that Earth cannot be defeated, Voss replied. Prove that continuing the war will only make their problems worse. The proof came in the form of the largest space battle. Galactic history, War Marshal Cross, desperate to achieve some kind of victory, ordered his entire fleet to attack Earth's moon. He believed that destroying the lunar colonies would force humanity to surrender, but Captain Clark was ready for them. The Guardian defense station had been upgraded with Zahirian biotechnology and was supported by hundreds of ships from Earth and their rebel allies. When the Confederation fleet attacked, they found themselves facing not just human and Zafran vessels, but ships from dozens of species throughout the galaxy. The battle lasted 18 hours. In the end, nearly half of the Confederation fleet was destroyed or captured, while the Allied forces lost only a handful of ships. War Marshal Cross himself was forced to surrender when his flagship was surrounded by rebel vessels, commanded by officers who had once served under him. The defeat at Earth's moon marked the end of the Confederation as a galactic power. Within days, government officials throughout their territory were fleeing their posts or switching sides. Rebel movements that had been fighting separately began organizing into a new political structure. 6 months later, representatives from more than 200 worlds gathered on Earth for the founding conference of the Galactic Democratic Union. President Santos welcomed them all to what had once been a small unknown planet on the edge of nowhere. We gather here not as conquerors but as partners, Santos said. In her opening address, our new alliance will be based on the simple principle that every person in the galaxy deserves freedom, dignity, and the chance to live in peace. Commander Valdris, now serving as the first Secretary General of the Democratic Union, stood beside Santos as they signed the new Galactic Charter. The document established basic rights for all sentient beings and created a system of mutual aid between member worlds. No species will ever again be abandoned in their time of need. Valdris declared, we will stand together, help each other, and ensure that what happened to my people never happens to anyone else. The ceremony was broadcast to every world in the galaxy, watched by billions of beings who had lived their entire lives under Confederation rule. For many, it was the first time they had ever seen their leaders speak of freedom and cooperation instead of conquest and profit. 10 years later, Captain Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of humanity's first deep space exploration vessel. He was older now, his hair gray, and his face lined with wrinkles, but his eyes still held the same wonder they had shown on the day the Zephyrians first appeared at the edge of human space. Beside him, Commander Valdris watched as their joint crews prepared the ship for departure. They were heading beyond the galaxy itself toward distant star clusters where new civilizations might need their help. Do you think we'll find others out there who need assistance? Morrison asked. Valdris smiled, the same beautiful expression that had amazed humans when they first met her people. The universe is vast, and there will always be those who need help, but now they won't be alone. We'll be there for them just as your people were there for us. The ship's engines came to life, filling the observation deck with a soft humming sound. Around them the lights of 1,000 worlds glowed in the darkness of space. Each one represented a people who had found freedom, a civilization that had learned to help instead of exploit, a species that had discovered what humanity had always known, that true strength comes not from power over others but from lifting others up. As their ship jumped to hyperspace, heading toward unknown regions filled with new challenges and new opportunities to help, both humans and Zafrans carried with them the lesson that had transformed the galaxy. When someone needed help, you helped them, not because it benefited you, not because they could repay you, but because it was the right thing to